What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, August 13th, 2020. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We've got a lot to talk about today. And as usual, I'm going to talk about news until I run out of news, at which point we'll turn on the phones and let you call in with your comments, questions, and opinions about what's going on in the world. Mike, as usual, is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble here. And our corporate news here is still spending a lot of time, not all of it, but a lot of it, still talking about Kamala Harris being Joe Biden's running mate, and going back and doing the post-mortem on their joint speech that they gave out yesterday, basically saying their entire message seemed to be get Trump, stop Trump. And that really was all they really talked about. Everything else was jingoism and platitudes here. But, Joe Biden made his first joint appearance with running mate Kamala Harris, centering the focus on the need to give the boot to Donald Trump while touting the California senator as the first woman of color on a major party ticket. Notice they're now starting to say major party ticket because all those women, black and white, who ran on smaller third parties, they don't count. You don't count unless you're in a major party. But opinions on Kamala Harris are very divided, even among Democrats, where some people are out there saying, oh, it's about time. We've got to get Kamala Harris. I mean, with Joe Biden deteriorating that fast, she could be our first woman black president of the United States. And then you have the other camp, which says this is the worst pick for a vice president since Sarah Palin. So opinions are varying wildly on this thing. But the fact that Biden picked Kamala Harris seems to suggest to a lot of people that the former vice president has no business making executive decisions on behalf of the entire United States. They're not saying it's all that smart. Now, Vice President Mike Pence insists he can't wait to debate Kamala Harris in Utah, as he says she has embraced the agenda of the radical left. Now, their debate is scheduled for October 7th in Utah, about a month before the actual general election. And Mike Pence apparently is thinking he's going to do very, very well there. Unfortunately, and Donald Trump has already hit this, the vote by mail will already have started by the time these debates are underway. And Donald Trump doesn't think that that's fair. And I would agree with him. And it's not a question of fairness to Donald Trump. It's a fairness to the American voter, who has a right to see these candidates up there debating each other and take their measure before they vote. So something to keep in mind. Now, it turns out Kamala Harris' ancestors were slave owners. Will the left cancel her? Well, as you probably have figured out by now, I'm no fan of Senator Kamala Harris. I don't like her. She's very insincere. She comes across as very fake. I don't agree with a lot of her policies, like sanctuary cities and stuff. But that being said, Kamala Harris is not responsible for what her ancestors did. None of us are responsible for things that happened before we were born. Nor can we take credit for things that we had nothing to do with. In my case, the Underground Railroad. So the fact of the matter is that if you dig into anybody's past ancestry, sooner or later you're going to find a horse thief or a gambler who cheated or some other nefarious individual, maybe a politician. And you can use that to smear them in the current woke culture. Now, I don't like Kamala Harris, but my dislike for her has got nothing to do with anything her ancestors did. I don't agree with what her ancestors did, but I understand Kamala had nothing to do with it. Now, if she comes on out and defends the ancestors and says, yes, they were right to have slaves and slavery is right, that's something that we can and should take her to the woodshed for. But just saying that somebody's ancestors were slave owners, I'm sorry. I don't buy with that. All righty. Story coming on out of PatriotRising.com. Apparently, according to the latest polls, the majority of voters think Biden's VP will assume the office of the presidency during that first 4-year term. Now, Biden has made no secret of his hostility towards the Second Amendment. Neither has Kamala Harris. Having them on the Democratic ticket might be all the motivation gun owners need to get off the couch and vote this year. The chore now for grassroots gun rights activists is to make sure their friends and family members are registered to vote, then get to the polls or basically get to the polls. Forget those mail-in ballots. Harris' addition to the party ticket underscores the warning to gun owners, owning voters that this year's election is truly for all the marbles. They want those guns. They want to be the only ones that have guns. And of course, the criminals. Criminals will always have guns, but nobody seems to be too worried about them. The attitude of the Democratic gun grabbers has always been, if we disarm the law-abiding citizens, there won't be any reason for the criminals to have any guns, because which has never worked out, by the way, here. CNN editor-at-large Chris Cillizza is implying that Joe Biden would step aside for Senator Harris. There's another voice saying he will not finish his first term in office if he wins in November. That he'll go in for a year, he'll get to do some parades and some speechifying, then he'll simply say, you know, I have to resign for reasons of my health. So, Tucker Carlson skewered Biden-Harris presidential ticket is entirely hollow, and he's right. It's definitely form over substance, both in the case of Biden, who's being propped up and made to look like he's got all of his marbles when clearly he doesn't. And you've got Harris, who, as I said earlier in the show, she comes across as false, as fake. And there's a tremendous lack of sincerity coming from her when she speaks. And like I said just yesterday, if you want a really good way to tell about a candidate when they're making a speech on TV, turn off the sound. Don't listen to the words, watch their eyes, watch their body language, and see if they come across as genuine and sincere. And if they don't, then vote for somebody else. Then we have, of course, that Joe Biden has been accused of sexual assault accusations. And not too long ago, Kamala Harris was saying, well, yes, I believe these women. I believe them. The question is, does Kamala Harris still believe Joe Biden's accusers? I mean, can you imagine her calling her friends and saying, I got the job, I got hired by a guy I called a rapist? A little weird out there here. Okay, Kanye West is out there with his fledgling presidential candidacy, and apparently he's polling 2%, which is rather amazing. But apparently he met with White House senior advisor Jared Kushner last weekend, according to a new report, after launching a presidential campaign that Kanye West has openly indicated was aiming to siphon votes from Joe Biden. Now, they're insisting that the meeting with Jared Kushner had nothing to do with that, and that they were discussing other issues, which they didn't go into detail. But it's hard to take Kanye West seriously anyway. And I think it says something about the American electorate that he's got the support that he does here. Okay, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Here's an interesting little story. She's a businesswoman, and she's expressed support for the far-right conspiracy theory QAnon, was criticized for a series of racist comments, has won the Republican nomination for Georgia's 14th congressional district, and has all but guaranteed herself a seat in the House of Representatives. And after winning, she was doing her little victory lap because everybody said, oh no, she can't win. She's said racist statements, she's made anti-Semitic statements and anti-Muslim statements. We can't have her. And they've got her. The voters gave her 57% of the vote. And Marjorie Taylor Greene's opening shot at Nancy Pelosi is, we're going to kick that blank out of Congress. We'll see what happens there. Whoops. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Mike, we just had the power dip here briefly, so have a tape ready in case we lose our power. We are under the leading edge of a thunderstorm here. Okay, Mike? Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. All right. Well, but we had a blackout. We're back up here, and oh yes, the wilds of Indiana. Now, getting on back to the Democratic National Convention, which starts this Sunday virtually, the speakers list is quite revealing of what's going on inside the planning rooms. Far from being progressive, the Democrats seem to want to enshrine the glories of the past. The lights just dipped again. They're going to have the Clintons up there speechifying. They're going to have the Obamas up there speechifying. And Bernie Sanders and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are both scheduled to speak, but with very, very short amount of time. In fact, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez will have only 60 seconds for her pre-recorded speech at the Democratic National Convention. Supporters are saying it's a slap in the progressive wing. Okay, now this, I think, tells you just how far we have deteriorated lately. San Francisco Senator Scott Wiener has introduced a bill to decriminalize men having sex with boys. And he and his allies are smearing all opposition to this bill as homophobic and anti-Semitic. What has anti-Semitism got to do with the idea of not approving of men having sex with boys? How does that get to be anti-Semitic that you don't agree with that? Is Senator Wiener saying that this is actually part of this of the Jewish culture for adult men to have sex with small boys? That's going to be a real news flash for a lot of people. The fact that he actually introduced this bill, I think it says a lot about just how deteriorated our society has become. All right, we're still seeing looting going on over in Chicago, and apparently looters smashed the doors to Ronald McDonald House. There were 30 frightened families along with their sick kids huddled inside the children's charity. And that's the kind of thing that's not going to make the public support your efforts. It looks wrong when you go after the clown. And it basically tells me that whatever leadership Antifa and Black Lives Matter or the looters have, they really don't understand the link between popular support and the changing of socio-political realities. They don't get it. They're just out there to make noise and smash things up and say, do what we want or we're going to do some more. All right, I want to talk about this 5-year-old boy, Cannon Hinnant, was riding his bike in front of his own house last Sunday in North Carolina, and a neighbor, 25 years old, basically walked on over, pulled a gun out, put it up to the 5-year-old boy's head, and pulled the trigger. And just shot him dead in front of his 7- and 8-year-old sisters. There were witnesses to it. They got the guy. He's in jail and everything. Now, you would think a story like this would be getting coverage in ABC, NBC, CBS, and so forth and so on. But it isn't. And that's because it doesn't fit the narrative, because that 5-year-old boy was white and the 25-year-old suspect was black. And they're still not releasing what the motive was supposed to be. Apparently, the neighbor knew the family. You know, the 5-year-old boy's father and this suspect had been friends, or at least casual acquaintances. And all of a sudden, he just walks on over with a gun and blows this little kid away. But because he is black and the victim was white, the news media doesn't cover it. And it's not getting to the front pages. Now, critics of mainstream media, corporate media, have observed there is a pattern of black on white violence being ignored by the media and white on black violence being hyped to fit the agenda that the blacks are oppressed by the white population. And they're absolutely right. But the independent media is stepping on in here, and we have outlets like Hideout Now saying the national media is silent after a black man executes a 5-year-old white boy in front of his house. And right now there's a trending Twitter hashtag say his name, which is out there chastising the corporate media for ignoring this story. And they shouldn't ignore the story. Because the reality is, if you look at the numbers, the crime in this country is not all, evil white people shooting and killing poor, helpless, defenseless black people. Most violence committed against blacks is by other blacks. And there's a lot more violence committed by blacks than by whites. Those are the numeric realities. And our corporate media is trying to paint a completely bogus picture that somehow the white people, those white separatists, they're the problem. They're the ones you got to take the guns away from. And when you have a story like this, where this 25-year-old black guy just walks up to this 5-year-old kid riding his bike in his own front yard, puts a gun to his head and blows him away, Well, that doesn't fit the agenda, so it doesn't get the media coverage. Very angry about that, and I hope it does blow up in the face of the corporate media that they didn't cover this story. All righty, over in Illinois, North Central College professor Adam Kotsko went to Twitter to insist that the Constitution is racist. And he qualified it by saying that it could operate in non-racist ways, but claimed that the design and effect of the Constitution in all its iterations has been racist, and that therefore America should abolish both the Senate and the Electoral College. Now, I've heard the arguments about the Electoral College, but there really is no reason to abolish the Senate. The Senate originally existed to give the states more voice in the government. Unfortunately, that got taken away post-Civil War. But for him to go on out and say the Constitution is racist, that's their next target. You know, they're tearing down all the statues of Columbus and the Confederacy and the flags and everything. Now they want to tear down the Constitution. I wonder what they want to replace it with. Now, one of the things that concerns me is looking at what's going on over in Belarus, where they just had an election in which the incumbent has claimed a sixth term. His opposition, and apparently a large number of the people of Belarus itself, are saying the election was rigged and there's been rioting in the streets. So Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland have issued an ultimatum to Belarus to let them mediate the election talks between Lukashenko and his opposition or face sanctions. Now, my concern is we're going into an election in which they're not even trying to hide the fact that there's massive vote rigging going on, mostly within these mail-in ballots. And that if Biden pulls off an upset victory, and I know the polls are all saying Biden's going to win, but then the polls in 2016 were all saying Hillary was going to win. She got her clock cleaned. So my concern is we've already got violence in the streets of America. What's going to happen if Biden wins, which puts Kamala Harris on the fast track to the Oval Office? What are Americans going to do? In fact, to be very honest, at this point, it doesn't matter who wins. It's going to be a contested election. The side that's on the loose, they're going to be in the streets like they were in 2016. So it's something I'd like to avoid, but I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. Okay, China is increasing their military pressure on Taiwan. 2 Chinese jets briefly flew across the Taiwan Strait median line, which is the de facto border between China and Taiwan, on Monday morning, in what has been a busy year in cross-strait military exercises. While the jets were signaling Beijing's displeasure with U.S. Health Secretary Alex Azar's ongoing visit to Taipei, similar missions have entered Taiwanese airspace and waters at least 20 times this year. Meanwhile, Beijing has reportedly deployed the H-6J bomber to South China Sea's Woody Island. And apparently there's a photo circulating on Chinese social media, shows one of China's most advanced bombers, the H-6J, on the airfield on tiny Woody Island, a growing Chinese settlement in the Paracel Islands in the South China Sea. The photo, which originated on Sina Weibo before making its way to Twitter, shows a Heian H-6J, China's updated version of its H-6 bomber, based on the Soviet Tupolev-16 Badger, sitting on the tarmac of what was purported to be Woody Island, which the Chinese call Yongxing Island. Not the capability of the backfires, but the Badgers, they're still formidable. Now, a little bit of good news here. We think. We're still waiting to see what really happens here. With Trump's brokering the deal, Israel and the United Arab Emirates have reached a deal to normalize relations. And basically, this is a good thing for Trump because it gives him a foreign policy success as he goes into the re-election on November 3rd. Okay, we're going to take a break for commercials here. And when we come on back, more news. And welcome back to our show here, and a friendly little reminder and nudge in the ribs that Republic Broadcasting is holding a perpetual fundraiser, and they really need your help to stay on the air. They need to replace equipment. They need to upgrade and buy new equipment, like a 5-second delay. And, just it takes a lot to get this sort of an enterprise up there and running. So the postal address where you can send a check Money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. The network thanks you. All right, well, we're starting to get a lot of calls on the line, so we're going to go ahead and start taking phone calls, starting with Mark in Georgia. Hello, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I just want to let you know I just succeeded in getting around the Food and Drug Administration, part of the derives its authority from the part of the Constitution written in invisible ink. They say you can't get hydroxychloroquine. Yeah, but what you can get, I ordered online. You might want to write this down. It's Quercetin, quercetin. And
Yes.
It is basically the bark of the malaria, the thing that was used for malaria. But the thing you need to be advised, they did dummy experiments, meaning, well, this thing helps zinc get into the cells to prevent the cells from being taken over by this virus. So the thing is, if you take this, but you don't take supplemental zinc, I'm not saying go out and chew on galvanized nails. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I am saying, one thing I have, and I ordered some more of, is Emergency is it has these little packets where you mix it with your drink, and it has vitamin C and various natural ingredients. And I hate it for it to sound like a plug, but I contacted them and I mentioned this, and I was wondering if that was in there, and they might just come out with a product that has that ingredient just to meet this getting around the federal government, as I call it, has put out this obstacle saying you cannot use this hydrochloroquine, or HCQ is a nice little abbreviation for it. So it's like, okay, well, look at this other stuff that we don't need your permission for, and we can use that as a prophylactic to keep us from getting this house cat flu thing that you keep fear-mongering us about. Fair enough?
Sounds good to me.
All right, well, that's the main thing I wanted to get across to you, and, like I say, if anytime you want those questions that deserve well-thought-out answers, I'm ready, whenever you are, to look at the questions, and maybe I'll get some other learned people involved, because your questions deserve respectful answers, not the way you got treated decades ago. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Daniel in British Columbia. Hello, Daniel. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I phoned a couple weeks back, and I sort of made this observation about this Black Lives Matter movement. So I kind of seen a pattern with the Obamas getting on the board of directors of Netflix, with Susan Rice, the Spike Lee movie about the KKK coming out, and Who Killed Malcolm X on Netflix just happened to come out last a few months before this George Floyd incident.
Yes.
And I did, there was something else that I forgot to mention, and that was the Jussie Smollett incident. So could toss that one in there. And then that sort of led up to George Floyd incident, and then the John Lewis death, the congressman who was the civil rights activist, just happened to die 100 days before the election. Nothing to see here, folks, But I wanted to add something with this Kamala Harris nomination for vice president. It seems if, I'm just wondering if there's a lot of Israeli billionaires funding Biden like they did Hillary this time around. Unless they think that there's no chance in heck that they're gonna pull off a win. I'm just sort of curious about that. And I know that Kamala Harris is talking about reparations, and my prediction is if they do lose, because there was a lot of blacks that were polled that said they were going to vote for Trump, about 35%, and even if that was half, Trump would have taken the black vote for sure. So now all of a sudden they've got a black woman for vice president. Seems like that was their answer. And if they lose, I could see a lot more rioting in the streets. I mean, if they're willing to riot over someone getting shot that was shooting at police in Chicago, then they're going to really go crazy if they lose. They're going to be really triggered. Antifa and Black Lives Matter are going to be triggered. So I kind of see, you guys getting set up for something here. And even the Black Lives Matter representative in Chicago was saying, oh, yeah, we don't care if Gucci's was looted and burned and whatever. That's reparations, Insurance will cover it. I mean, it's just a ridiculous thing. And I looked on the Black Lives Matter website, and there's nothing about condemning the violence.
No, there isn't.
Everything about Marxism and so
forth. Daniel,
so
I got to put you on
leave
hold.
you with that.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Well, thank you very much
fine.
for the phone call. We got to take another break, and we'll be right back after these two words. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to get back to the news here. Meanwhile, the phones are open, 800-313-9443. The United States and Israel say they have successfully tested an anti-ballistic missile interceptor known as the Arrow 2. They tested it against a Sparrow target missile, and so they're out there still trying to, build these things here. The rocket is partially manufactured by Boeing and developed in cooperation with the U.S. Missile Defense Organization. So once again, Israel is out there playing with hardware and weapons that the United States has built. All right, we're going back to the phones. David in Boston. Hello, David. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, aloha, Michael.
Yes.
Yeah, Michael. I keep a close eye on Alex Jones. I listen to him just before your show. He comes on from 12 to 4 back here on the East, and then you come on. But Michael, I've said in the past that he's always talking about the globalists, but he'd never in a million years talk about the Kabbalists. So the reason I mention that is I'm calling Kamala Harris. I'm calling her Kamala.
Okay.
How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Kabbalah, I don't think Jones is going to. But you know how they say Kabbalah Kamala. But you know how they say the enemy, the best way to control the opposition is to lead it.
Yes.
And, I'm absolutely. What Alex is doing lately, he's invoking the name of God and Christ and the Holy Spirit. Michael, and I know this isn't a religious show or anything, but Michael, there's a term and a word for what Alex is doing, invoking the Lord's name and everything, and it's called taking the Lord's name in vain. You have an ulterior motive. Yeah, and I'm absolutely convinced, Michael, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me and everything, but I'm absolutely convinced there isn't one sincere bone in Mr. Bone Broth. I say there's not one sincere bone in Mr. Bone Broth. He's always selling bone broth. I don't think he has a sincere bone in his body. So, I'm absolutely. I just would say that hey, people can watch his show. He has good guests. He surrounds himself with good people. He can learn a lot and everything. But I would just warn people to just never follow him. I'm absolutely convinced that he is the man, the Judas goat, that's how they're controlling the opposition. That's how they're controlling the opposition, by letting Alex Jones lead it. And I'm absolutely, and I could give you some reason. Well, one quick reason, and I know you have a lot of calls, Michael, because it's a popular show, but just one thing off the top of my head is just Phil Turning and the Liberty. On every June 8th and everything, there's no mention of the Liberty at all, not even in passing. He doesn't even acknowledge the anniversary of their attacks on the Liberty, let alone invite Phil Turning on his show on like June 8th, and any member of the Ron Kukol or one of those guys. But that's just one thing. But there's many reasons why I'm absolutely convinced that he is a Judas goat, and I'd like to hear him talk about Kabbalah Kamala. If we're sick of hearing about the globalists, that means nothing. But now if they're not talking about the Kabbalists, that would really start to mean something. You know what I'm saying, Michael?
Yep. That would. Well,
so
Alex Jones has had a bias going in. In fact, if you go over to YouTube, you can run a search on Alex Jones supports Israel. And it's a video from very early in his career where he's out there saying, I'm a supporter of Israel and I always will be. And it was at that point that his little enterprise really began to take off.
Yeah, he's right down there with what I call John Hagee there, and he calls his church the Cornerstone Church, but I call it the Millstone Church, not the Cornerstone Church, the Millstone Church. He should hang a millstone around himself and cast himself into the sea. But he's right down there with that. I call it goofy. He calls it Koofy. Christians United for Israel. They call it Koofy. I call it goofy. But Alex Jones is right down there in Texas with that fat pig that should be the guest of honor at a luau. Speaking of aloha. That fat pig Hagee should be the guest of honor at a luau. But Alex Jones is right down with him and never speaks out against somebody like John Hagee. But there's many reasons why I'm absolutely convinced that there's not a sincere bone in Mr. Bone Boss Man. So, but thanks so much for taking my call. People, like I say, I'm not trying to discourage people from watching his show. He has a lot of interesting guests, and he surrounds himself with really high quality people and everything. But as far as ever following him in any serious way, one caller called in and was saying that he wishes President Trump would appoint him the commander of the militia and everything. But he's into just hawking his wares and selling his ambrosias and his what's that? That quackery stuff and everything. And he's never gonna lead. He's never gonna seriously lead. Any real opposition. He's a Judas Goat. I think he is the man. As I say, the best way to control your opposition is to lead it, and they have their Judas Goat, Alex Jones, leading it, and so Alex has Alexa now. Alex and Alexa. You can't make this stuff up. Okay, so. Thanks for taking my call, Michael. Okay, you have a terrific show. You have great callers, and I know your callers are sophisticated. And your callers are sophisticated enough. I think most of them will receive my message. The amateurs would be outraged that I called Alex Jones a phony. They'd think that was terrible to call Alex a phony. But he is. He's a phony. Absolutely, he's a phony. Okay. Thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go there. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, the U.S. defense leaders are pointing the finger at Russia and China as the reason for the U.S. Space Force being created, claiming the nations have militarized space, requiring the U.S. to respond. Well, that's not exactly true, because the Pentagon has been testing space-based weaponry for decades. Does anybody here remember the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, also called Star Wars? They spent a huge amount of money, almost bankrupted the country, with all these space-based weapons. So it's hardly Russia and China that started this particular aspect of the new Cold War here. South Korea has unveiled a design for a new aircraft carrier that will specifically carry the F-35Bs, and the carriers dubbed the LPX-2. Based on the Dokdo class helicopter carriers, the LPX-2 is far larger and reconfigured to accommodate the vertical takeoff capable F-35B Joint Strike Fighter like U.S. amphibious assault ships do. Boy, a lot of thunder and lightning out there. According to the plans revealed earlier this week, South Korea's next aircraft carrier will be a dedicated light aircraft carrier, not an amphibious assault ship. However, it will be far larger than Seoul's present assault ships, the Dokdo-class landing platform helicopters, which have both a flat flight deck above for helicopters in addition to a well deck below. Everybody's arming up here. Russia is getting ready to set up a continuous assembly line for the Sukhoi 57 fifth-generation fighters. The Komsomolsk-on-Amur Aircraft Factory, which is part of the Sukhoi Aircraft Company within the United Aircraft Corporation, is modernizing its production capacities to launch the continuous assembly line for the latest Sukhoi 57 fifth-generation fighter jets. So they're getting ready to mass produce those things. Meanwhile, the U.S. can't get all of the problems with the F-35 fixed. They're in arguments with Lockheed now about, well, if you want us to fix these design flaws, you're going to have to modify the contract and give us more money. That's like buying a car and discovering it's only got 3 out of 4 wheels. You go back and you say, where's my 4th wheel? And they say, well, you got to pay us extra for that. Now, this is kind of a very concerning story. Apparently, there was an Air Force helicopter was forced to make an emergency landing at Manassas, Virginia, after someone shot at the helicopter from the ground. The FBI is investigating. They don't know if it was an individual or if it was a group of people. But apparently there was a UH-1N Huey helicopter that flew out of Joint Base Andrews and was on a routine training flight at about 1,000 feet altitude when an unknown individual or individuals fired on it from the ground. Now, I'm kind of wondering what's going on here. Some of this reporting is a little inaccurate. From hideoutnow.com, they said the helicopter assigned to move President Trump and top officials shot at, injuries reported. Well, the president has his own helicopters at Andrews, and they're not UH-1Bs, but other officials. And I don't know if somebody's sending a message or somebody seriously thought they could bag a helicopter with a top official in it. But apparently the one crewman who was injured, it was a minor injury. Turning over to COVID-19 here. Russia is ready for international cooperation on COVID-19 vaccine for everyone. Having registered the world's first COVID-19 vaccine, Russia is preparing to cooperate with anyone interested in developing and producing vaccines and treatment for the coronavirus. We are ready for international cooperation with all interested partners in the development, production of vaccines and treatments to ensure a coordinated global response to the spread of COVID-19 and a common victory over the pandemic, Ambassador Vasily Nebenzia told the UN Security Council on Wednesday. Now, the Russian vaccine is being described as simple and effective, and that it can be trusted. And certainly I'm going to trust the Russian vaccine way ahead of anything coming out of U.S. labs or Bill Gates for that matter here. But we're already seeing articles showing up about, oh my goodness, how, this was unethical, the way that they tested this. Putin risked his own daughter for this untried vaccine. And we're already seeing them trying to bash this because they want to preserve their market share. The big pharmaceutical corporations wanted to have a vaccine or a treatment that they could sell to the rest of the world. Well, they missed the boat on that, but they still want to sell to you, the American people. And that means you, the American people, have to be convinced not to go the Russian route. Okay, we got a caller waiting on the line. Rick in Arizona. Hello, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Am I breaking up, Mike, or am I coming in okay?
You're coming in okay. I can hear you loud and clear, and you're on the air.
Okay. If I was head of the NCAA,
yes,
and this election cycle was a basketball game, I would have to investigate the Democrats for point shaving. Kamala Harris has to be the worst pick you could possibly come up with if you really want to be president. I don't think the Democrats want the job, Mike. I really don't think they want the job. I think they want to look. Trump is the best Democrat money can buy. He gave the Democrats everything. Did nothing for the people that voted for him, except for the Jews. He took care of them. And so, as far as I'm concerned, I think that's a rigged election. They're just letting them have it. And as far as Tom goes, Tom, you should write a letter to President Trump and ask him to fix the problems that you're complaining about because he's president. I mean, all this violence and all these statues and stuff like that are being taken down while he's president, and he ain't stepping in and stopping it. So, I mean, I don't know, man. I think the whole thing's it's a total, as far as I'm concerned, people, this is such a scam. And if you can't see it, I guess, I don't know, what can I say? Thanks for taking my call, Mike.
You got it. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. Trump is a disappointment. No two ways about it. But I think the Democrats, by and large, do want to have control of both houses of Congress and the White House. And I think they know they can't win it with Biden. They wanted somebody who'd be an easy to control puppet, both for president and vice president. And I think that's exactly what they got. And they're planning on basically using this mail-in ballot scam to basically steal their way into control of both houses of Congress and the White House. And the goal there is to be able to load up the Supreme Court with a bunch of liberal justices and to keep pushing their agenda to turn this country into something else. Anyway, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and it is really storming heavy outside. So now, turning to the economic news. Americans may not get their second stimulus check until September, which is next month, a couple of weeks away, if Congress can't reach a deal by Friday. An insider with the Internal Revenue Service believes that Americans may not get their second stimulus check until September if Congress cannot reach a deal. And right now, they do seem to be at loggerheads, each side blaming the other for being intractable. The global depression will be brutal. Tens of millions of Americans can't pay their bills and are in danger of eviction. And I heard this one story about this woman who had twins just 6 months ago, and she just got evicted from her home. Now, maybe the economy was on the verge of a crash anyway. In fact, we know the economy was on the verge of a crash, and now they've got a convenient scapegoat. Of course, the Democrats are all blaming Donald Trump for the crash of the economy, and Donald Trump can turn around and say, it wasn't me, it was the coronavirus. We know that the economy was in serious, serious trouble going back decades. The Treasury Department has announced a record $112 billion quarterly debt sale, basically a new tsunami of bond issuance. My question is, who's buying all this debt? Are they really that confident that this government can pull out of this tailspin of spending? U.S. government yields at 234-year all-time lows. Bond market expects a deflationary depression. Now, Virgin Atlantic, which is 49% owned by Delta, becomes billionaire Richard Branson's second airline to file for Chapter 15 bankruptcy protection, as it's feared the carrier will run out of cash by next month. Whoa. That one was close. Okay. Okay, hang on a second. All right, you may want to call in here right now because we're getting ground strikes real close to here. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the show up to the top of the hour, and then we're going to go to a repeat because I want to power off all this equipment so we don't get a lightning strike. Anyway, so there we go. Another day, another record low for the real U.S. 10-year yield, now below -1%. Another article, this one out of Investment Watch blog. Could gold reach $7,000 by 2030? Well, yeah, it could easily, and it's more a question of not whether gold itself is more valuable, but how less in value the dollar is. And as a matter of fact, right now we're doing a little business with somebody who's in Great Britain, and because of the drop in value of the dollar, I had to spend more dollars to convert to British pounds to get the invoice paid. We got to take a break for commercials. We got another caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here, last segment of our live part of the show today, because we're under a really major thunderstorm. I've seen one ground strike just right out here the back window, and we have surge suppressors on all of equipment here, but we had to leave the uninterruptible power supplies and line isolators back on Oahu. So we're going to take a couple more phone calls and then switch to a best of for hour number 2. Teresa in Alaska, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I don't know if you've already discussed this or not, but how can Kamala Harris be nominated for vice president when her parents were not U.S. citizens? Doesn't that disqualify her?
No, because she was
I've heard
born.
it mentioned, but nobody's really, doesn't seem like it's really being discussed.
Pushing that nonsense. Somebody's pushing that nonsense. The reality is, if you look into the Constitution, it says a natural-born citizen, which means, you know, obviously you were born here in the United States and you're a citizen by birth of the United States. There's no requirement for the parents to be natural born. Otherwise, when this country was first started, everybody was, you know, the son or daughter of people who'd only recently moved here. So
well,
that
yeah,
wouldn't
but in the Constitution, they said after a certain amount of time, that no longer applied because they admitted at the beginning of the country, everybody was in that situation. But they had a time limit on it.
The time limit on it was the time limit on it was the people who were serving in office at that time, who may not have been U.S. citizens by birth, but they were just getting started at that point. But the requirement, and I've posted the legal definition of a natural-born U.S. citizen, and that is somebody who was born in this country and has citizenship thereof. They've never renounced it. They've never committed an act of treason. They've never committed a felony, for example. that would disqualify them. So much as I don't like Kamala Harris, unlike Ted Cruz, she does qualify to be president and vice president.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We're going to switch over to Andy in Texas. Hello, Andy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, hey, Mike, I just, that's kind of interesting that, in the original Constitution, natural born citizen wasn't there. That was the 14th Amendment that made us all citizens, whatever. And that wasn't there when we wrote the Constitution. But I just want to say thank you to the QAnons and the always Trumpers, because they've showed us exactly what following a leader and to his death, what's that called? Stockholm syndrome. I mean, everybody is on this guy. Everybody's on this guy's bandwagon as though as if he's some sort of victim here, and nobody's realizing that he's an actor. That he's just not that guy. We're being played right into this, and it doesn't really matter. And the last caller, or one of your callers before, said something about that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden really trying not to win. They really don't care who wins, to be honest with you, because Donald Trump's not doing anything to stop this. And we are all in this conviction. I'm even still on the borderline, because he's doing some things that make me wonder, like, yeah, well, maybe they really are after him. But this could be serious CIA operatives. We know who Steve Pachenik is. This guy took down several different governments just using propaganda.
Hey, Andy, I got to let you go. Andy, I'm sorry. We got to take a break here, and I'm signing off here for the live portion of the program. We're going to go to a tape here because we're under a big thunderstorm. And to be very honest, I could not afford to replace this equipment if we took a lightning strike. So I'm going to shut it all off and unplug it all from the walls for the rest of the day. So stay tuned for hour number 2 as a tape. And after that, John Stadmiller. And we'll be back tomorrow with the lovely Lady Claire. So aloha, America.